Okay, so this week we're doing probability, and so this probably makes no sense to you guys, but odds and probability cannot be used interchangeably. They're actually different things. So of course I had to find my meme for the week. So this is my meme that I found. So this week we're talking about probability. Well, I can skip the outline. There are only 2 sections that we're covering this week. And I already have videos on both sections already in the classroom. I have a video on 9.6 and on 9.7. And the video on 9.7 actually has an example very similar to one of the problems on the homework. So I definitely recommend watching both of the videos that are already in the instructor videos so that you can see the ones that are similar to the homework. So that will make things easier for you when you do the homework. Because there is, I think it's question 4. Is there 4 questions this week? 3 or 4 that's like a doozy for a lot of people. And it involves probability and counting things. And as I said in my announcement, people are really bad at probability because it's not intuitive. Our brains don't work that way. I struggle with it, so I always have to double check all my work multiple times because, it's like I'm not confident because I'm like, this doesn't make sense to me, but the math is right. It's one of those things that your brain just has a hard time with it. So we've only got those 2 sections, and because I already have videos for those, what I decided to do this week for my live is I'm going to just leave it open for questions. So looking at my calendar, I decided to set it up for 7 p.m. on Tuesday because I'm not going to have office hours on Monday because that's Veterans Day, and Grantham's closed on Veterans Day. But I also figure, well, everything is due on Tuesday, so if I have a open 1 hour where I'm on this video chat where you can come and ask me questions about the homework, that would be a great time, Tuesday night when people are turning it in. So 7 p.m. next Tuesday is just going to be open. Log in, ask your questions, and I will help you out, do things on the, the whiteboard, that sort of thing. So, so that's for what we're covering, and I accidentally have the self-assessment on here twice as I'm looking at my PowerPoint. It has been one heck of a day. I was looking at the wrong week on my calendar, and my other classes, I told them the wrong time for the actually, I think I usually put the self-assessment at the end, so I'll get rid of that one. But I gave them the wrong time for when I was doing the live session because I was looking at the wrong week, and my brain has just been all over the place. So apparently, I really wanted you guys to know the self-assessment because I put it on here twice. So let's start with the discussion. And so this is another one where we're going to have to do some research. And so the prompt says to research the meaning of expected value. And an expected value is a very specific mathematical term in probability. So share with us your interpretation of what it means and how this could be useful. If you could figure out how it's useful towards your job, kudos to you, because any way that you can connect what we're learning to what you're going to be doing is awesome. And then try to explain an example of a real-life application, emphasizing its importance. One thing I do tend to see this week with the discussion is a lot of people using the same examples. So try to use different examples than other classmates. And what I would recommend doing is reading the posts of your classmates before you post yours, just to make sure that you're not using the same example. Because if you see the same example over and over again, it just kind of gets boring. So the more variety we can have, the more interesting of a discussion that we can have, because it's a lot easier to reply to a variety of things. So I'm specifically going to be looking for that you have talked about expected value, what it means in your own words. You've discussed how it can be useful, and then you've also explained how it can be used in real life. If you can include actual numbers and working out some math, that would be even better. Any way that you can back yourself up with numbers and math, that is great. That's awesome. Make sure that you do include your links, especially because expected value is not something, I don't believe that it's in either of the 2 sections that we read. So that's something that you do have to research what it means outside of the classroom, which means most likely the internet. So you are going to have to make sure you include your sources. And especially if you're trying to find real life applications, if you can't think of one immediately, you'll need to use outside sources for that. So make sure you're including your references. But this one shouldn't be too bad. It's usually pretty easy to come up with different ideas for expected value. So your assignment this week. So, oops, that's supposed to say week 5. I'm continually forgetting to update since the slides usually look roughly the same. We've got 5 graded problems again for this week. And so, of course, make sure you're showing all work. It's easier. Some of the problems for this week actually don't even really require work. Like question 5 is like a one-step problem. So there's not really any work that you need to do for question 5. But I think it's question 4 where you need a lot of work. So that one's going to be worth more points because it's going to be more steps. So again, make sure that you're answering all of the questions asked and that you're giving your answers in sentences and with context, so I don't have to search for your numbers and then be like, what does X mean? I need to know what that means. Make sure you are explaining where your numbers are coming from, so you're not just I've graded the week 4 assignment today, the application assignment, and the one thing that I noticed is a lot of people were giving numbers that were not given in the problem, but they didn't say how they came up with those numbers. So if you have numbers that are not given in the actual problem itself, you do have to explain where those came from and how you got them. So that's part of showing all of your work. And then, as I mentioned, make sure you're watching my videos because I do go through similar examples to some of the ones that are on the homework. And I did that deliberately, especially on the one that's due, where you are trying to find the probability. You're picking from 5 cards from a deck of cards, but you have lots of different choices. And it's not a regular deck of cards. It's not where there's like 4 suits. It's like you've got different colors and all these other things too. So that one's a little harder. So I did an example similar to that, so definitely check those videos out. And of course, if you have questions, you can always ask me them before you turn in the assignment to make sure that you are doing what's expected, you've answered all the questions, that sort of thing. I'm happy to take a look at it and just do a quick look over. If you send it to me before it's due, I won't check every single answer, but I'll look and see if I see any glaring mistakes, like, oh, you didn't answer this part, or oh, your notation here is really off and I'm not sure what you're doing. So I don't look into the big details that I do when I'm actually grading, but I can give you feedback and look for the big things that you may have wrong. So that's the assignment. And of course, your reflection journal, I haven't graded those yet, but the reflection journals for week 5, because probability is so difficult, I expect the reflection journals are going to be very interesting, talking about your struggles, trying to figure it out and make sure it makes sense. So it should be an interesting week as far as reflection journals go. And then our self-assessment for this week. So of course you guys had a midterm last week, so now we're back to just a regular self-assessment. So it's 10 questions. And of course, you can do these up to 4 times, so you can improve your grade. And it's definitely worth your time because I think these are worth like 20% of your grade. So any improvement you can make on the self-assessment can make a huge improvement on your overall score. And then, so the schedule that I have suggested, since we have just 2 sections for you to read this week, I initially was going to put all of the reading, all the links in one day, and then I figured, well, there's no reason. We can split those up. I do recommend doing the exercises. Those are all on Khan Academy, and those will be very helpful for you to learn the formulas that you're using, making sure you're entering them in correctly, making sure you're writing them correctly. That's another thing. We're doing permutations and combinations, and if you are typing up your work, make sure you're typing those correctly, because a lot of people last term lost points because they weren't correctly writing the formula when they were typing it. And while they were doing it correctly, you have to also make sure that what you're typing, that you're showing everything, like your formula is correct as well, because otherwise your formula and your answer don't match. Like if I do what your formula says, I won't get your answer. So those have to match. So just be very careful about how you're entering those in, and that you do have them, if you're typing them, that you're doing it correctly. Otherwise you can handwrite those. And then I pulled out some suggested practice problems. I picked them from the Chapter 9 review. So there's only like 3 or 4 problems for each of these. I tried to pick ones that were sort of similar to the kinds of things that you'd be asked on the application assignment. And so the first 2 problems on the application assignment have to do with 9.6, and then the last 3 have to do with 9.7. Most people get number 1 and number 2 correct, or they'll have a small mistake on number 1. Number 3 is usually correct too. So it's number 4 and number 5 where most people make the biggest errors, and usually number 4 is the big doozy one. So that number 4 is the one that I've got the practice, or I've done a similar example in the video. So definitely check that one out. That's in the 9.7 video. And of course, because there's only 2 sections, you have plenty of time to work on resubmissions. So I definitely would recommend taking the time to do so that you can improve your score there. Because there is extra time for that. And especially you're going to want to try to do that this week if you can, because next week is going to be a doozy of a week. Next week we're covering a lot of sections. So I just want to give you a heads up. So this is going to be a kind of a break before you get into that. So because I believe, if I'm remembering the order of everything correctly, next week is where, or next week, week 6 is where we start trig, and we cover like 8 sections that week. It's kind of ridiculous. So if another option is to use this extra time on like Monday and Tuesday to maybe start reading those sections and working ahead, because I do have some videos for those already. So that might be another option, is just to kind of start working ahead, because it is a lot of sections. So that is it. That's the big expectations for the week, the tips that I have for you guys on the application assignment. You guys have been doing pretty good with the reflection journals, now that you have an idea of what you're supposed to be doing for those. So those have been working out pretty great. Your discussions, of course, have been great. So I don't have any tips or advice to show you, to give you guys for that, other than keep up what you're doing. So are there any questions? Do you guys have any questions for me? Marty, I see you reconnected. Do you have any questions? All good. Okay, great. So if you guys do think of questions, especially if you're struggling with the probability, let me know. It will put your brain in a twist. It puts my brain in a twist, especially the Monty Hall Python problem. Oh my goodness, my brain. I know how Monty Hall works and I know how the probabilities work, but my brain still doesn't want to believe it. So I definitely, if you're not familiar with it, definitely check that out. It's crazy. It's kind of weird. All right, so I'm going to pop off, make sure I get this processed and everything, and put this in the classroom. So thank you very much for joining me.